All right, we are rolling. So welcome everybody to the Mode Shift Omaha kind of finale of our Giving Tuesday event today. So we are super grateful. I think it's important to start off saying we hit our goal of $6,000 thanks to everyone on this call and not on this call. So super grateful and happy about that. And the goal of tonight is just kind of dive into different ways to get around town in Omaha. So we have a little, it's not that short, it's like 16 minutes. It's a lot of my face. I apologize. Some of the audio wasn't as quite what we wanted. So it's a lot of me voiceovering being read. But we're gonna do it here, and then we will have a discussion afterwards. So I think we might as well just get into it. If everybody is ready, we're gonna do it. Okay, let me go to full screen. Okay.
You click to share the sound too?
Did. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Excellent point though. Thank you, Liz. All right, get ready. Here we go. Hi, I'm Sarah Johnson, the volunteer and membership coordinator for Mode Shift Omaha. Mode Shift is a transportation equity nonprofit started in Omaha in 2011. We mostly serve as an advocacy and information sharing organization, and today we're here to shed some light on different ways of getting around Omaha. We like to encourage folks to shift their thinking and eventually their mode of transportation. We have a lot of conversations with folks that are curious about ditching their cars once in a while, so today we're going to be highlighting a commuter comparison. The concept is just to show that there are different ways of getting around town. We're going to also showcase more than just time. There are several different pros and cons for each mode. The experiment that we're going to be looking at today involves 3 modes of transportation. One person drove their car, one person took a bus, and one person took a bike, an electric bike, from the Benson Library to City Hall. We chose that trip because it's a pretty familiar situation going from Benson to City Hall on Tuesdays for city council meetings. We also wanted to highlight that it's leaving from the public library. There's a lot going on with libraries right now, so we thought that that would be worth highlighting. It's also a replicable experiment if anybody else wants to try it. The concept is pretty simple. Choose 3 modes of transportation, a starting point and a stopping point, and then you can use the scorecard that we've created, which we'll get into in a moment, to compare your commute. I'm Sarah, and I'm going to be riding my bike.
I'm Stephanie, and I'm going to be driving my car.
I'm Kai, and I'll be taking the bus.
Here we go.
Let's go.
All right, let's get into that scorecard. Basically, we wanted to kind of come up with some metrics, again, so that this would be a replicable experiment. We chose, once again, a car, a bike, and a bus as far as the modes of transportation. And then the different qualities that we looked at as far as kind of ranking the trips were time, cost, environmental impacts, health, both physical and mental, and then pleasure or leisure, as well as adaptability or flexibility. Starting with time, since that is what most folks seem to be most concerned about. Yes, the car did get there the quickest. When Stephanie drove from the Benson branch, which is at 60th and Radial, down to 1819 Farnham Street, City Hall, it took her 21 minutes and 31 seconds. That involves walking from the front door of the library to her car, finding a parking spot once she got to City Hall, and then walking to the front door. We were pretty excited and not terribly surprised that the bike was only a minute and a half behind her, a minute and 37 seconds to be precise. So the bike took 23 minutes and 8 seconds. Yes, it was an electric bike, but I think that that's what more and more folks are using for transportation. So we were excited to see that that was a very close comparison. The bus did come in last, but only 10 minutes after the car. So I think that that's a pretty viable mode of transportation when it's only a 10-minute window. We were pretty excited to see that it was only 10 minutes and 20 seconds after the car arrived. And again, that involves waiting for the bus trip itself, and then walking from the bus stop to City Hall.
Just to clarify, Sarah did ride an e-bike. It is street legal. It's a class 2, which means pedal assist, no throttle, for those of you that know the different classifications of e-bikes. And then Kai rode the number 4 bus, which is not Orbit. It's not as fast. It doesn't come as often. And the bus stop was it 4 blocks away? she had a little bit of a walk, more so than the car from their parking space. So back to you, Sarah.
Our next metric is cost. Again, back to the bus situation. Kai is a UNO student, and UNO is awesome and gives all of their students, and I actually have one as well, since ModeShift has an office on campus, a free pass. So you can use your MAV card to ride the bus for free. So regardless of whether or not you're a UNO student and have a free pass, the bus is still the most cost efficient way to get from A to B. It's $1.50. So that got the #1 ranking when it comes to cost. The bike was second in line because, you know, when you factor in maintenance and whatnot for an electric bike, it is certainly less than a car, but more costly than just riding the bus. And then last on the list, as far as cost efficiency, is the car. We use AAA as a source for this, but between car payments, insurance, title, registration, tax, gas, all the things that you have to do for your dear car, it's over $9,000 annually to own a car. So that definitely is the least cost-effective way of getting around. The next quality we're looking at is environmental impact. The bicycle we rated as #1 there because it's the least amount of wear and tear on the roads, least amount of noise pollution. It's the smallest vehicle when we talk about land use, and, you know, zero emission. The bus is next because definitely lower emissions than a car. With the amount of passengers you can fit on a bus, it is definitely going to be the most efficient in that regard. It also saves fuel, again, per person, and reduces congestion. The car is, again, last on the list. Air pollution, land use, the cost and environmental impacts of continuing to build and widen roads and interstates, and definitely the biggest contributor to climate change when we're looking at these three modes. After environmental impacts, we decided to look at health, and that is both mental health and physical health. The bicycle, #1, once again, not only are you getting the most movement, exercise, if you will, e-bike or otherwise, you're getting fresh air. You're also, I mean, for me, it's definitely #1 for mental health as well. I love riding my bicycle. You know, obviously we are the ones that created the scorecard and have ranked it as such, so there may be some bias in it, but I really do believe that it's hard to argue against the physical health impacts, and that was why we put the bike #1. I a lot of times say pedal happy because, you know, when you're riding your bike, waving at neighbors that you pass or just kind of interacting with your environment a lot more is good for your mental health. It's good for the community, and good for your physical health. The bus ranked #2 here because you do have a little bit more walking, since you have to walk to the bus stop, which was about a block away from the Benson Library, to the stop where Kai hopped on the #4 to head downtown. And then she did have several block walk where the bus dropped her off. So that is #2. We also, as far as mental health and riding the bus, we thought that that was, again, worth ranking #2 because it's pretty relaxing. Once you get on the bus, you just kind of sit back and enjoy the ride. So pretty stress-free there. That does not apply to a car drive. You know, road rage is a thing that really only applies to folks driving cars, and it is the most sedentary. You're just sitting there. A lot of folks, you know, eat while they're driving, or, you know, unfortunately, create a lot of death and injury on the road due to distracted driving. So not only is it stressful, it's not good for you physically either. The next item we have on our qualifications or the metrics list is pleasure and leisure. We talked about this a little bit under mental health, but we ranked the bus #1 under pleasure and leisure as well, because as Kai mentioned, her favorite part is reading a book. She was able to check emails, kind of play on her phone. It was just very leisurely. You just hop on the bus and then you're taken care of. It takes you where you need to be, and you're able to kind of relax and get some stuff done or just enjoy your time while you are there. We ranked the bicycle #2. For me, it's definitely the most pleasurable. I love riding my bike. It's just definitely fun. E-bikes specifically, total game changer. I used to own a bike shop and we would sell e-bikes and people would come back from test rides literally giggling when they got off. So the giggle factor is high for me on this one. So we ranked the bike at #2. Again, the car is in last place here. The only part that Stephanie could really come up with as far as what she enjoyed about driving was that she could listen to some music. But Other than that, again, we talked a little bit about road rage earlier, distracted driving. There's really just not that much that's pleasurable. Again, some people like driving and that's fine, but it's not leisurely. You need to be focused on the road. You can't be doing anything else. You really need to be not texting, not eating, not a lot of the things that we see people driving cars do. So we ranked this number 3 because we don't think that there's much leisurely about driving. Once again, the distracted driving situation is a big issue. Unfortunately, we hear about crashes on the roads all the time, whether it is due to alcohol or speed or distracted driving. Cars are not pleasurable because they are sometimes death machines. Anyway, I'll stop harping on that for now, and we'll move on to our next item here, which is adaptability or flexibility. That is definitely something that we hear a lot about from folks that are considering switching a commute. What if my kid gets sick at school and I have to wait for the bus to get me to my house to get the car to get the kid? So as far as adaptability and flexibility with trips or a change of plans, we did rank the car at number 1 there. So in case there was an emergency, it is certainly the easiest and most flexible to just hop in that car and go where you need to go. You're not waiting on a bus route. We did rank the bus at number 3 because you are dependent on that schedule, and it is not nearly as flexible as just being able to hop on your bike, which we rated number 2, because that one is, again, you're not relying on someone else's schedule like you are with the bus, but depending on what your emergency or your need for flexibility is, you may not be able to go grab someone, a passenger or something like that. There are some restrictions, but in general, it goes 1, 2, 3, car, bike, bus, as far as flexibility and adaptability.
And then also, I would add that, you pretty much could drive a car any time of the year. And it's just now starting to get cold in Omaha. And if you're properly dressed, you can ride a bike year round. Just got to put on a few more layers. And I guess the thing if we were to do this again in the wintertime, would we factor in the amount of time shoveling snow to get out of your car?
Yeah, that is definitely, there's a good point with the weather being kind of a game changer in some of this. When I hop on my bike in the winter, I actually kind of laugh to myself as I'm riding by people digging their cars out of snowbanks. Before you hop in your car and drive somewhere, you have to clear off the windshield and defrost your windows and warm up the engine and all of that stuff. So, as far as flexibility and quick response, I would still argue that, yeah, the bike is pretty hard to beat. But again, we did this while there was no snow on the ground. It was a pretty decent day. It was a little bit chilly and a little bit windy, but for the most part, pretty decent travel conditions. So now that we have gone through our scorecard, we just kind of wanted to do a general review of the results. So we added them all up. Again, car, bike, and bus. We had rankings between 1 and 3 for each of these categories: time, cost, environment, health, leisure, and adaptability. And we came up with, any guesses? That's right, the bicycle is number 1. Again, we're not professional scientists. There is some bias involved, but we think for the most part, this is a pretty easily replicable scorecard. And so we'd encourage you all to do it. We added everything up and the bike got 10 points, which is the lowest number and therefore the winner of this little experiment. Again, to just kind of hit some of the highlights, we found it to be the most efficient or the best tool for the job, really, when it comes from this perspective of riding from Benson to City Hall. It was also pretty affordable, better for the environment and personal health, and definitely the most fun. The flexibility was moderate. We, again, talked about that, but I think as far as the worst part of riding a bike in Omaha, there is not a lot of protected infrastructure. We are grateful for the Harney Street pilot, but that is the only piece of protected bike infrastructure in the city right now. So a lot of conversations we have with folks who would be willing to ride their bike involve safety. Of course it should. If you don't feel safe and comfortable taking a trip by bike, you're not going to do it. So we are really hoping that Omaha will understand that it is crucial to build a safe, protected, and connected network of bike lanes all over town. Of course, they can't go on every road, but we would really be grateful for a network. The Humble bus rated second here. It got 12 points. Yes, it was the slowest, but it's the cheapest and better for the environment than driving your car. It's also better for your personal health, pretty leisurely, not super adaptable as we talked about, but if they had more efficient lanes, better frequency, you know, a little bit more dedicated infrastructure, bus lanes where there couldn't, you know, have blockages with cars, that would be a little bit better rating than it already was. The car, we added up, and 14 points is what the car got. Sure, it is the fastest, but it is the most costly, both financially and environmentally. It's a non-sustainable way of getting around. It is adaptable, sure, but the health of yourself and the planet should, in our opinion, trump all of those other speedy and adaptability factors. You know, we can't really talk about cars without talking about potholes. Road construction is something else that can be a factor. Stephanie did not have too big of an issue finding parking, but as we know, Omaha loves to talk about free and convenient parking. She was able to find a metered spot on, I think, about a block away. So pretty good parking opportunity for her. This, again, a lot of these factors could change depending on the type of construction. She just used, I think it's important to say that she just used the Google Map recommendation. She mentioned that she may have on her own chosen a little bit different route, but yeah, overall, we were grateful that everyone was able to participate and get from A to B safely in different modes. All right, well, thanks for watching. That was our first experiment as far as the commuter comparison goes, but we would encourage you to let us know what you thought. Do you have another trip in mind that you would like us to commute and compare? Maybe you don't live in Omaha and you would like to replicate this experiment. We would certainly encourage you to do so. We're also interested in feedback. You can find us on all sorts of social media at Mode Shift Omaha. You can also email us at info@modeshiftomaha.org. Again, this is just the first of hopefully multiple experiences and experiments. We know for sure we want to highlight how different it is and how difficult it is, how many barriers there are for folks in wheelchairs when they are getting around Omaha. Not everyone in a wheelchair chooses or has the ability to drive, and relying on Mobi is something that really deserves a deeper dive that we're hoping to do in the future. We're also interested in looking at ways folks get to and from campus. UNO actually has 2 campuses. It's interesting to learn from some of our professor friends at UNO's campus that many students drive between the Scott campus and the main campus on Dodge. So we believe this is the first of many experiments to come, showing that you don't have to drive everywhere. Sometimes it just starts with shifting your thinking and eventually shifting your mode. Okay, that was what we did. So, again, big thanks to this guy here who's not a professional editor, but he did that. Again, huge thanks to Kai for playing our reindeer games, and Stephanie and Maria. Maria is rad. And again, I just want to say, I really thought that little first couple second bumper is legit and it makes us look cooler than we maybe are. So, yeah, I am glad it's over. It was a little bit stressful there towards the end trying to get it all wrapped up, but we did it. And, you know, I talk too much as per usual, but we kind of, yeah, pedal faster next time. We did have some pushback on like, oh, it's not a regular bike, it's an e-bike. Yeah, it is. And I think that's what we're seeing more and more. So I will stop talking since you've just had to listen to me for 16.5 minutes. Yeah, I'm done. I think Liz is going to kind of ask Kai and Stephanie and Maria maybe some questions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks everybody who helped make the video possible. Well, I'll start and see if there are any audience questions for folks in the video.
I just want to comment on Sarah's e-bike. Not being an e-biker and pedaling with e-bikers on different events, I don't think that really matters. You still have to stop at the lights and slow down, if not stop at stop signs. So I think that's probably a moot point. That I bet if you average somebody without one against yours, is probably going to come in within seconds.
That's something that we kind of have thought about too, is just like, you know, it's not really that huge of a time savings. I think it might be a little bit, maybe at some point we will do a comparison with like an analog and an e-bike. That's, you know, not a bad point at all.
Or a B-cycle and a spin scooter.
Yeah. Talked
Yeah,
about.
I thought that the other day when you were riding with Don Rowe up the Harney Street cycle path, and I just happened to be biking that way too, and I was on a regular analog bike and you all were on electric bikes, and I found that it was not hard at all to keep up with everybody. In fact, I was sometimes leading the pack. I mean, it doesn't seem to matter electric versus
I could work with.
standard bike. It's just a matter of comfort.
It would matter if I was part of the group because I will always be slower than anyone on an e-bike. However, I still think that, you know, and I put this in a tweet earlier today. So with that graphic that you guys put together that, you know, showed the little dots moving along the routes. I mean, part of the when I first started like not using a car to go downtown, I would do a bike bus combination because I wasn't that comfortable commuting on my bike. But then it was like, you know, I could do this faster, even as slow as I am, if I was just on my bike. And then like Sarah helped me learn how to do that. So I love the ideas now of combining Orbit with e-bikes and maybe scooters for those last few blocks for people who want to use wheels. But I think, you know, just the continued effort in raising awareness that, you know, maybe you don't have to drive a car every day for everything you do. We just keep chipping away at it. And I kind of feel like we're, you know, raising some awareness about that. And that helps me be optimistic a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. And Clyde also put something in the chat about biking and busing. I think when you add those together, you're going to increase your adaptability and your speed. So that would bump up the bike and bus in the comparison, maybe above the car.
I have a question.
Sure.
There's a large audience out there, and I can speak for that because my son's one of those. I encouraged him to get a bike. I encouraged him to use B-cycle. I got him a B-cycle pass for Christmas last year. It's a great gift, by the way, if you want to give somebody a gift of exercise and mobility. That's a great one. But my question is, there are people out there that, oh yeah, I love to ride a bike. I like to walk around, but then they get into a car, and I kid you not, we'll be at the mall, and I'll tell my son, oh, we can just walk around and cross the street. And he'll look at me like I'm talking a foreign language or something. And he'll go, well, I want to drive there. And I'll just look at him and I'll go, but it's across the street. What do you recommend
Well,
to help?
that's a good question, Jackie. I think it's a big question. And I think in a lot of Omaha, like if you're at the mall or something like a strip mall talking about crossing the street, like that was built not to walk across the street. So the design is telling you like, this is not a safe place to be a pedestrian. You don't want to walk around here. So I can see why people would say that. And I think some of that, like some people here may have better, you know, ideas, right? But there, you can like paint a crosswalk. You can put some green paint, you can put trees, right? There's a lot that the city and the merchants can do to make it nicer to be a pedestrian, but it's hard to get that to happen in Omaha. There's also a B-cycle deal if people want to buy B-cycle passes. It's like 50% off through today. So check out the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if people want to add on about that, that was a great question. Thanks, Jackie.
I think that's absolutely, I think you're right, Liz, that there's so many parts of the town that have just been designed that the expectation is everybody drives to every place. I've got dogs. And when you go from one place to another, that you're supposed to just drive. And I'm just gonna grab a dog. But the idea is just built in that driving is the expectation, and that anybody that isn't driving is sort of wrong. Here's one of those dogs. I think that's what needs to change, right? It needs to not be convenient. It needs to not be possible or even probable that someone would think this is across the street, but I'll drive it. And we can't change that individually, but we can start to, change minds. And I think that's where we're at right now.
So how do you, as an organization, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions to learn, how do you as an organization work with the city to promote a more pedestrian or alternative modes of transportation, including more friendly pedestrian streets?
Yeah, I'm gonna toss that one to Cindy to ask.
I was also gonna do that.
Yeah, no, we're gonna no, Cindy, you're shaking your head no. But talk about what you've done to make 72nd and Dodge, the center of town, a little bit more walkable, if not a lot, but a little.
Well, basically, it's just advocacy. Even with the walkability committee with Mode Shift, our group went to the ALEC committee, and we actually got some things passed through the city council, was it? As far as policy in construction and having sidewalks closed. So it's persistence, hard work, staying positive. But we really have to all work together. And yeah, the whole 72nd and Dodge Street thing was basically just me hammering the city all the time about it. But actually, I don't really think I had that much to do about it. I may have gotten the stop lines put in, but I think having the crossroads come in really made a difference. And Orbit. I think Orbit also did. I want to throw something else in here real quick, since I'm off mute, or yeah, unmuted. One of the things that people find so fearful that it drives me crazy is something's going to happen and I need my car. Something is going to happen, I need my car. So what about driving across the street, whatever. But people go to work and they think, oh, my kid's going to get sick or something's going to happen. I'm going to need to get home. We need to really push that idea that Travel Smart, that UNMC is doing. They provide cars. They provide opportunities for people who do have emergencies to leave and go. Sorry, I was just reading chat. Yeah, so there are opportunities for having vehicles there for you if you do need them. Plus, we also still have Uber and Lyft. If you run into a big problem, those are always options.
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to it, and I just threw in the chat that I would love to see a car share. We had one of the operators for a little while, but they were pretty limited in their scope. But a true car share would be nice. But I find a lot of joy in just living in a place where I can walk and I can get to what I want, and I can use a bike to get around. And most of what I need is near enough that, to your point, if something goes terribly south at one of my kids' schools, I can get there, and it's not like it's going to be devastating. And that's so rare that I can't even remember the last time that happened, honestly.
I'll talk about.
Sure.
So when I lived in San Francisco, I remember I think I had friends that would take the public bus to the emergency room. They would hurt themselves skateboarding. They'd be like, okay, I'm gonna go take the bus to the ER. And then likewise, I would take the bus or the BART to the airport. So I think starting with sort of simple, not necessarily emergencies, but until we get a bus line to the airport, that's not just for the employees. I forget. But yeah, I think I'd like to know a little bit more. Also, Cindy, you said that at UNMC, they offer an emergency car service. It's not an ambulance, or it's like that, or I've never heard anything about that. Do you mind talking a little bit more?
I actually saw a presentation by the person who was in charge of their Travel Smart program. Um, and they basically have cars available, like several cars. I don't know if they're just like parked somewhere, but those are available for people if they need them, like to run somewhere in an emergency during the day. We really should probably have somebody from Travel Smart come and talk to us about their program because I think it's pretty awesome. It may have changed over the years. This was several years ago. Somebody said, Zip isn't there anymore, but they may have specific vehicles just for people that
A
need.
lot of employers, I mean, I'm familiar with this model and it's been a model for 20 plus years. It's not like a new thing, but there might not be many other employers in Omaha that do it. I'm not sure.
When I was there.
So yeah, like a lot of universities do it like UNMC is the one we mentioned. And like, if you say that you won't, maybe you get to drive your car a couple times a month, but if you say that you're gonna like carpool, bus, bike, do something else, that saves them money. And they're able to say, okay, we'll pay for a taxi home if you need it, if some emergency happens and your kid is sick or whatever. So you might get like a pass that you give the cab, or you just like submit your receipt and they pay you back for it. And so they usually set up incentives and like encourage you to. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I just dropped that. So Connect Go did one of those like getting to work studies. They've been doing a lot of different studies. And one of them was kind of just proving that basically in order for folks to really shift their modes and get serious about getting around without a car, their workplaces have to incentivize it. I mean, we talk a lot of times about when the car is the default and the easiest and you've got free parking everywhere and gas is cheap and roads are plentiful and wide and whatever, everything is built around the car. Yeah, people are going to drive. But when employers especially do something, whether it is, again, talking about having an emergency backup car available or giving you a free bus pass or a free B-cycle ticket or whatever, that's when you actually see some of these things shifting. So I think, yeah, it's a culture, and whether it's the culture of the workplace to start larger and larger, obviously what ModeShift tries to do is shift the culture of Omaha so that folks are not just always so car dependent. But yeah, I think a big part of it is too, like seeing us all out there doing it, when I hate hearing, oh, there's no one on the bus. It's like, yeah, we need to get more people to ride the bus. Yes, it's a pandemic. Their numbers aren't really that bad considering, but the more times, people see folks using the bike lane or the bus or whatever, that helps too. And yes, no more free parking. We talk a lot about that too.
Hey, this is a question to kind of our three ladies that did the experiment. And I know I've been a commuter for a while, but could you kind of address another common concern I've heard about, and maybe it's in the adaptability, but the amount of preparedness. So if you're cycling, you've got weather to deal with. If you're busing, maybe weather. I've always heard car drivers, oh, everything, you throw it in the car and go. So is that something the three of you guys, compared or talked about?
Someone that's not me, please talk. Or Stephanie, for the love of God.
I'll jump in on this one because I am a car driver and it's not necessarily by choice. I would prefer to have different options, but I work in Omaha, live outside of Omaha, so that's part of it. But as far as preparedness and driving, especially when it's weather conditions are an issue, sure, I can, winterize my car by throwing stuff in there and it's just in the back of my car. But like Sarah had mentioned earlier, I got to go start my car. I have to warm up the car. I have to scrape the car. I have to worry about, are the roads actually plowed so I can get around safely? All of those still come into play. And I stress out on a regular basis in the wintertime thinking like, okay, what time do I need to leave my house to get to work on time? And think if the roads aren't plowed. And I have to worry about all the other drivers who are also thinking about the same thing, because everybody on the road is just thinking about where they're trying to get, not where they are. And all of that impacts how they're driving. And when you're worried about 50 million other idiots on the road, you know, I would say that sure, you can make it sound like it's easy by like, I can just throw things in my car and yeah, I can just prepare. But it's not that easy. I think we just take it for granted. We just deal with it. That's what's easy, is you just learn to deal with it, not the actual dealing with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say from a bus perspective, a lot of the bus stops don't have shelter. So if it's like a really windy day or if it's really rainy or snowy,
Yeah.
you will have to deal with kind of how that affects, and you have to prepare, you have to look ahead. And I've also heard that when it snows really bad, they push the snow to like the side of the road, and that's usually where the bus stop is. So I've heard some horror stories about that, but this will be my first winter as a bus rider, so I'll keep it updated on how that is.
Well, for over 30 years, working at Union Pacific, I commuted by bus. And when bad weather, it wasn't unusual for me and one other person that rode the bus to be the only ones on our floor showing up for work. The people that drive were always real late. And I had really good performance on the bus. And I just had to walk down to Dodge Street to catch the number 2, and it ran very reliably.
Clyde, I can echo that a little bit. When I worked at Creighton and lived in Blackstone before Blackstone was cool, I would, walk up to Dodge Street to hop on the number 2 and then just walk up 24th to my office at Creighton. For the same reasons. It's like it was a pain to like shovel out the cars. I was not confident in other drivers' ability to navigate safely, but I knew if the bus was running, I could get to work, because even if the sidewalks weren't clear, I was physically able to walk through that or over it or whatever. I think as we kind of refine our conversations around these issues, that those intersections about accessibility become really, really important. So, we talk about Orbit, and Orbit's great, and the platforms are heated, so that helps clear snow and ice from the platforms. But what about, how do you get to the platform? And these things I think are just so connected. And then with me trying to ride a bike to my studio a couple times a week, it's only 5-mile commute each way. So it's a doable distance. And then, sometimes for me, it's like, it just takes longer to pack my stuff for my bike, because I just have to be more thoughtful about what I'm taking or how I'm packing, as opposed to just throwing shit in the back of the car. So it just and I welcome the time. I have the kind of flexibility where I can take an extra 5 minutes to think, okay, do I need to pack an extra pair of gloves, or do I need a waterproof layer so I can get home comfortably, or whatever. I have the wonderful flexibility of being able to take that extra time. But with planning, it's like packing your lunch the night before you go to work, right? So if you can work that sort of planning on the front end, I think it opens up more possibilities.
So what about people with disabilities? There are people that pay a lot of money for disability services. They'll come pick them up at home or whatnot. But there are people that rely solely on the bus system. And I heard somebody say, well, if you're at the bus stop and it snows, then it's blocked. So it's going to be harder for somebody that may be in a wheelchair or has a hard time walking, has a walker, or even on crutches, that their accessibility to different modes of transportation is going to be hampered based on accessibility to transportation.
100%. Yeah, we
Funny
talked
you
about
should
that.
mention that. I think that there was a Car Free Midwest episode recorded sometime in February or March of this year, where there was an interview with a nice lady that uses a wheelchair to get around Omaha.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that's actually one of the focuses that the walkability team has, is making sure that sidewalks are considered transportation. They are a mode of transportation. They should be cleared of debris. They should be clear of snow. They should be accessible and connected, just like we say our roads are. So that is definitely something that we advocate for.
So Michael and I watched a video. Was it Norway? I believe it was Norway, in Amsterdam possibly, where they lift the sidewalk so you don't have to step down and cross the street, and the cars have to go over the sidewalk, sort of like, if you will, you know how it says, watch out, you've got a big bump in the middle of the street. But they lift their street so that the sidewalk is lifted all the way, so you don't have to step down, and it's not catered. The streets are not catered to cars. The streets are catered to alternate modes of transportation. It was a really good video.
Yeah, totally. Raised crosswalks do, there's a lot of data that shows that that's the way to do it. You know, like in Omaha, we struggle just to get paint on the streets, let alone a raised crosswalk. But yeah, you're right, Jackie. And we do talk a lot of times about how, you know, most of us on this call are rather privileged folks who get to choose to live where it's walkable and bikeable and whatever, you know, but we really we're cognizant of the fact that we need to be advocating for those folks who don't have the luxury to just, you know, speaking for myself, I mostly work from home, or I have to ride to UNO. It's kind of on my own schedule, but there's folks who rely on the bus. Like the other day when Metro didn't have any service on Thanksgiving, it's like, guess what? There are folks that still work on Thanksgiving, and for there to be no opportunity for transportation, that's a tough one. And then speaking of the Car Free Midwest episode, we also just talked with a few other, one board member and one just at-large general mode shift member. They both have disabilities and could drive but choose not to. And the Moby routes are reliant upon, you have to schedule them 24 hours in advance. So just having this conversation, it was just really wild. You know, Melanie was talking about how one time she forgot her badge to like be able to get into all the parts of UNMC, and she couldn't just like hurry home and go grab it because it was a 24-hour in advance appointment she had to make for her transportation. So it's like, yeah, we are definitely aware of the fact that there are folks with disabilities who don't have the physical ability to drive. There's also people who can't afford to drive. Again, we talked about a lot of these factors, but yeah, we definitely are trying to not just talk about people without disabilities. We know there's a lot more to dive into, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Jackie. That was a good question. A lot of people are excited about raised crosswalks. There was a question in the chat about zoning and zoning guidelines for public transportation, biking, and pedestrian access. I might have to rely on some other folks. I don't know if anybody from Missing Middle is here, but there was recently this whole effort by the city to do this, what was it, TOD,
transit-oriented development.
Transit-oriented development, thanks, Sarah. So they did all this work and all these meetings, and it's like, you have to opt into that. That's like new zoning, right? That is supposed to be higher density and better for transit, but it's like opt in, and so it doesn't really do anything. So yeah, that's sort of the best example I know of related to zoning, but
Yeah, it could be a lot better. But go ahead, EC, you're off mute. Let's chat.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I mean, it was mostly just what I've seen is coming from where we're at, the real push, both transit oriented, but also just thinking about requirements whenever a building is put up, that's in the planning and the conversation. So sidewalks, but also where can you park a bike after being chased away from a place in front of a building because they quote didn't want the building bikes littering in the front of the building. There's no infrastructure. The second thing that I was puzzled by or curious about, there was a recent article in Omaha World Herald about the number of jobs downtown compared to the number of parking places, and just playing that out, like documenting that. I don't know if there's ever been like an aerial view of downtown Omaha showing how much of this downtown area is covered in parking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Can I find that someplace?
Sarah, do you know where it is? I've definitely seen that before.
Like Streets Blog has done this, like comparing various cities and their sort of huge gaps or blacktop, if you will.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good point about zoning and like bike and pedestrian infrastructure. I'm sure that the city requires sidewalks on new developments, though there is the historic problem of places that got annexed into the city and the city allowed, the developers did not put in sidewalks, they didn't do the roads up to code, and then the city just brought those areas in and did not make those people upgrade their infrastructure.
Oh, ha, brilliant. Where is this? On Mode Shift, I should have known.
Oh, Sarah, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. I'm clicking buttons like crazy because I got excited that I found it. But yes, Mode Shift. So this was from a while ago. I'll drop the link in the chat. When the Omaha Performing Arts Society downtown was attempting to knock over a historic building and build another parking garage. And so we were like, okay, that's dumb. We're not gonna not say something about that. And so we had a rally and a bunch of attention was drawn to it. We partnered with Restoration Exchange and got them to stop that project gratefully. And so that was what that was from. And that was also from 2015. So, that's probably even gotten worse. I'm sad to say that I don't think things are getting better. We're still building parking like we just have endless land. So yeah, it's really upsetting how much parking there is. And yes, the spec building is still downtown and still beautiful, thanks to some of the faces right here. There is, if y'all have been following the Gold Coast situation, that goes to planning board tomorrow, where they're attempting to demolish 3 historic buildings that currently house 21 separate units in these 3 homes, and they're all affordable. And they're going to try to knock them down and build 131 unit 131 unit apartment complex with 1-to-1 parking on the TOD line. Like, that's what transit oriented development means in Omaha, which is bogus. Like, it's completely worthless in my opinion. I have a lot of personal feelings about that, that, Mode Shift echoes some of, so I should take off my t-shirt. But yeah, there's just like a lot of issues with parking in Omaha. And so the more we can kind of point that out and talk about the fact that we have plenty and we don't need to continue to build and build and build parking. Yes, let's all keep talking about that.
Sarah, who did the little graph?
We put it together, but I do not remember who specifically, like, initially.
Because I would be curious to, like, partly because I have time, to sort of update it, but also extend it. Was that south in, maybe not north, but a little bit north? Just because it's been interesting. And it's just awesome. The how.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who all was involved with that project, but I think, yeah, we basically, and I don't think it's just Mode Shift that has done this of downtown, but I think that, yeah, it would be really fascinating to do another like aerial shot and then be like, oh wow, service parking, garage, and it's just plentiful and people forget. So that would be awesome.
Right, and that doesn't include what's on the street, so.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, I realize I'm preaching to the choir a bit, but it was.
Glad you're here, man.
Yeah. Well, and someone else,
the guy at the city, Ken Smith, is that his name?
Yeah.
He is actually a somewhat reasonable person. And I think like all the data, I mean, he probably has it all, you know, about how many spaces there are, whether they're on street, in lots, undercover, and how much they're used.
Yeah, hasn't somebody mapped how much they're used for the garages downtown, and it's like super low usage, like particularly at like off hours when like people complain about not finding.
Part of, I mean, Ken
Do you
Smith
remember
was
that
part of that
graphic?
effort when I was when I was in the Artist Cooperative Gallery down in the Old Market. I mean, he used to come to the Old Market Business Group meeting and, you know, talk. I mean, he wants to see those spaces used. I mean, they've got those spaces there. I mean, they're revenue generators, right? So if they're sitting empty and unused, they're not generating revenue for the city. So I think in general, he is approachable and reasonable and, you know, open to conversation. So, and I think he probably has a shit ton of data that, you know, maybe we can make some use of.
And I know the situation has changed because, for instance, there's a lot more remote work happening and not as many people go into work that normally would work downtown. Like, for instance, Union Pacific is 50%, like 2.5 days per week, when they obviously used to be 5. And they've also cut workforce in the last 5 years since the study that Sarah was pulling up had been done. So that's 2 factors right there that would say that the parking garages are less necessary, less, you know, need for room.
100%. It drives me bonkers that like we know that work patterns are changing and we're still acting like we have to just build all this parking all the time. It's wild. So that's definitely something I think that we're going to be following as an org. And I know that Missing Middle, I brought up to them, I don't know, a few months ago about how we really should as a group get real about trying to eliminate parking minimums in a lot of these new developments, because we act like we don't know how to solve this affordable housing crisis. And it's like, oh, okay, well, this new development again at Gold Coast on 38th Ave, they are, I don't know if y'all saw Mode Shift's statement, but we're asking them to decouple the parking from the units, because right now to hear that developer stand up at the planning board and be like, well, we don't really know yet if we're gonna include parking. It's like, why are you doing this job then? You're clearly bad at it. If you don't understand how to make units more affordable, probably don't give them TIF. So email your city council person. That's going to be coming up soon. We'll bother you more about it later.
Speaking of that, I should know this. Is there a list of city council member, like geographic, as in, I just don't have a sense of who represents what parts of the city?
Yeah, just go to the City of Omaha page and drill down to the city council. There are district maps with clear demarcations. You'll be able to see it all very easily.
Very good, thank you.
Well, great questions. Oh, and I didn't get to the part that EC brought up around bike parking and zoning. I don't know what the code says, but I assume that bike parking is not required by Omaha code.
No, it's not. Again, talking with developers at Crossroads, Cindy and I and a few others, like they were not going to put any bike racks, any. And so until Mode Shift stood up and said, hey, you maybe want to consider like not just making everyone drive there. So like these are the types of things that the people on this call take for granted and are like, oh, surely, but no, like Mode Shift is here for this reason, to continue to tell the city and developers and whoever we can get in front of that things need to be done a little bit differently. I mean, everyone just gets so stuck in this like tunnel vision of build for cars, that they forget about the rest of it. So no, unfortunately, we get a huge tip allotment and not have to put a single dang bike rack.
Yeah, the city does have some bike racks, or they did, and you can request them. If you're a business owner, you can request that they be put in front of your business.
That's right. And they're free, but you have to fill out a form And instead of planning for it at the front end, it's, you know, making the business owner after the fact say, oh, maybe it would be nice to have some bike racks here, and then wait for the city to put them in.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
and-
out of them right now. I just put the rack request form in the chat. I a lot of times have people just like reach out to me personally. And the Bemis actually just reached out to me and said, hey, we've heard that you know things about bikes and we want a bike rack. And so I connected them with the city, Kevin Carter, another decent human working in planning. And they are out right now, but mid-December, they're going to get another influx. And yes, they will install them for free on the city right away. So you can either email Kevin Carter at cityofomaha.org or fill out that form.
Is there a way to, like, I guess, like, systematically go like this? I had this at the Durham. I ended up parking my bike right in front of their front door just to be obnoxious, and partly because they had a nice little thing for electric bikes, but there was no place. And unfortunately, I've got to write back to the person. I talked to the person at the front desk, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I've complained about this for the last 6 years, and no one's ever done anything." So. But if there was a way to like systematically list all of the major like destinations or places where people go regularly and just say, hey, do you know about this? And just assume they don't know.
Love it.
Yeah. That's a great idea, but you know, I bugged Target forever. I've also bugged Duluth Trading Company. I mean, things that are like right off the Keystone Trail practically. And you know, basically Duluth won't put one in. They said it's up to their property owner, and the property management says no. Target finally did get bike racks. Once again, it may be due to some little pressure that Lockwood's put on them. Lockwood has really worked hard to come up with some solutions to some of our asks.
Who is Lockwood?
The developer.
Lockwood Development is doing the Crossroads, and then they've also done some other major, like part of this off of 132nd and Pacific.
It's interesting that property owners would say, oh, I don't want more people coming to my property, to my businesses to help them be successul. No, don't want them.
So EC, one of the things I do is I just take my bike inside.
I've done that too.
I do.
Or I've locked it to some structure very close to the front door just to be obnoxious. Like one of the things that used to piss me off when I was spending a lot of time down in the Old Market is that the Old Market Business Association would have its meetings at the Embassy Suites, and the bike rack was almost a block away from the front door, because it's like they didn't want the bikes near the front door. And I was always the only bike parked there, and I would complain about it every time. But I mean, that, you know, that's just me. So I think there are ways to, you know, like wheeling your bike in with you. I've done that too. It's like, especially in a place with big aisles like Target, it's like, yeah, I'm not leaving my bike out there. I'm bringing it with me.
Well, you know, I take mine into Office Depot, Office Max on Dodge Street all the time, because none of their structures outside are small enough for me to put my bike on. I would have to have a chain that was like ginormous. So I just wheel it in there, and I park it next to one of their shopping carts, so that when I leave, I always take off if I have my e-bike, I take off my computer so nobody will steal it. But if I just take my regular bike, you know, I just lean it up against the shopping carts. They're kind of used to it by now.
I've specifically talked to that manager about bike racks, because I'm like, I have an office at UNO. I'm here all the time buying membership folders because y'all are awesome. Keep buying memberships. And so I was like, same thing though. It's a property manager. They said they won't do it. So a lot of times that is what we run into, but I don't think it's ever a bad idea to have a conversation, because so many of these things aren't necessarily that folks are against bikes or against walking or against busing. It's just, that's not the way they think. So good on you, EC, for asking questions, and Cindy, of course, all of us, you know, like, so keep asking questions and keep leaning on ModeShift if you need us to amplify your voice, or say, hey, you know what, we'd like to follow up on this request because we have the same one.
Yeah. Yeah, and EC, if you have time and you're interested in mapping, I don't know if you're on Slack yet, but you should.
I've usually tried to limit all my various communications to at least a manageable number. So,
But maybe Sarah could connect you to my spouse, Ryan. He's a professor at Creighton. He's doing a bunch of mapping with a spin grant that we got. It's not really money, but it's access to these big data sets. And so he's doing a bunch of mapping around biking and stuff. So you guys should talk about mapping together and maybe you can help each other.
So I'm sorry, what was his name? I'm really taking notes myself. What was his name again?
Ryan Wishart. Ryan, it's just Ryan Wishart at Creighton.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I will. That's easy enough. That's close enough. I can get there.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Also, in general, if anyone has questions about things or connections, email me and I will connect you.
Yeah. And I wanted to say there are a lot of good ideas and we should think more about pushing for better zoning that requires bike parking at least sometimes. And, think about some of the other, what else? Oh, the snow removal at the bus stops. I put this in the chat, but like I learned recently at the Pro Rail Nebraska meeting, somebody in Lincoln pushed for a while and like got the city to say, okay, that's a good idea. We should do that. We should make the bus stop safe. And they did agree to pay for snow removal at bus stops. So we could do that. So these are, good ideas and things that I think we should think about running some campaigns on and pushing for. Anybody else want to say final things before we wrap up?
I do want to say something. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. One thing, while you brought up zoning, I remember reading in the book Walkable Cities how Jeff Speck talked about there's sometimes overly cautious requirements for parking for building new buildings and new construction, stuff like that. Would that be a useful use of anyone's time to say, do we need to look over those requirements for, building parking for new construction and say, all right, do you really need, 1,000 parking spots? That's an exaggeration, but for new building as opposed to what is realistic?
Yeah. And actually I have heard that the city is trying, I think, Sarah, to push on developers to have less parking on the like BRT, but it's not like a required zoning thing.
Yeah, it's all baloney.
Like a conversation maybe, but sometimes like I've heard that the financiers of the projects will say, they're like, oh no, you have to have this much parking. That's what we do. And so, yeah, it's hard if the zoning isn't saying this is it.
So get involved with the missing middle housing team. And call the mayor's hotline, because this is the thing that I wanted to say really quickly. So 444-555 is the mayor's hotline. I have it on speed dial. Apparently, the mayor's hotline report compared complaints about sidewalks from January 2021 to February 2021. And they said that there were 98 complaints in January and 1,539 complaints about sidewalks in February. But the mayor's hotline apparently thinks it was all submitted by the same individual, which I'm sorry, that's like more than 52 emails a day.
I saw that. I laughed so hard. I was like, just do some math. One person was very busy sending 52 emails a day.
Yeah, exactly. So my point with that is we should all call the mayor's hotline individually when we see sidewalk issues so that we can hammer home, hey, you know what? This is an actual issue. And even if it was one person, which it clearly was not, this is an issue that I think we are working towards as an org, like Cindy was saying, and a lot of us have touched on. We're trying to get sidewalks classified as part of the transportation network so they will be taken more seriously and not just seen as an afterthought.
And yes, I think the hotline, which used to be an app, but is not an app anymore, does count the number of people who call or email or any way contact them, right? Cindy, you email them a lot.
Apologies, I put too much in the chat. I was going to just ask, could we do a future agenda item on the Vision Zero action plan? If that hasn't been done.
Yeah, we should circle back on that. We had the Vision Zero coordinator come and we had a decent conversation with him, and he had some good ideas that we had to sort of be like, well, we tried to ask for that, and the city said no. But
They have an RFP going out for posting on January 5th for the creation of a Vision Zero action plan.
well,
So
what's the coordinator been doing for 6?
I have no idea.
Exactly. He told me he couldn't come to a couple of our Walk With Us events because he was busy working on the action plan.
Well,
So like, yeah, why did we hire
I
this
just
guy,
saw.
stick him in public works where he's doing apparently not, okay, that's great to know. EC, can you send me where you found that and then I will follow up?
It's in the chat.
Good.
Oh,
Just
okay,
put it in the
perfect.
chat. Okay.
Scott's doing extra exciting things to
But
make.
yeah, we should circle back on the Vision Zero thing, because we have a person who's been hired by the city all year, and as far as we know, nothing has happened.
Yeah.
Unless somebody else here knows of
My
something.
question.
Well, I head up OTOC's North 30th Street intersection safety team. And Jeff has helped us putting in some new signage that we requested up there. So it's a small thing, but anyway, he did
That's
help us with that.
something. But yeah, I think he's still on staff as far as I know. Okay, well, thanks everybody. Thanks everybody for helping us have a successful Giving Tuesday. I appreciate everybody participating and look forward to reconvening in the new year.
Okay, looking forward to the Grammy nomination in the documentary film division.
Don't hold your breath.
Thomas in
Thank
the
you.
chat.
We did put it in the chat. It is. We've made it public now. You all were the first to see it. It was not public until now. So yeah, thanks for coming. I'm gonna hit stop record here in a minute, and then we'll probably just end it anyway. But I'm hitting stop record.